Good morning, everyone. We're going to be exploring the topic this morning of is homeopathy, halakhic medicine. Homeopathic medicine, alternative medicine. Sometimes these terms are used interchangeably. And the launching point was a headline that I saw through a rabbi, a Dayan in a Bezdin from the Beis Vad Halacha Center, Dayan Yitzchak Grossman, who also seems to be culling the headlines for interesting halachic material. And source number one is from an AP News report several months back. New York midwife who gave kids homeopathic pellets instead of vaccines fined $300,000 for falsifying records. A New York midwife who gave nearly 1,500 children homeopathic pellets instead of required vaccinations has been fined $300,000, the state's health department announced this week. Jeanette Breen, who operates Baldwin Midwifery on Long Island, administered the pellets as an alternative to vaccinations and falsified the immunization records, the agency said Wednesday. The scheme, which goes back at least to 2019-2020, involved families throughout the state, but the majority reside in suburban Long Island. I did not use her. In 2019, New York ended a religious exemption to vaccine requirements for school children. Breen, a state-licensed healthcare provider, supplied patients with real immunity homeophylaxis program, a series of oral pellets that are marketed as an alternative to vaccination but are not recognized or approved by state or federal regulators as valid immunizations, according to the health department. She administered 12,449 of the fake immunizations to roughly 1,500 school-aged patients before submitting information to the state's immunization database, claiming children had received their required vaccination against measles, mumps, rubella, polio, chickenpox, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, hepatitis B, and a host of other diseases, the department said. So a couple of issues that could emerge in terms of, and one which is interesting in terms of obviously this violating of the law of the land. And that also requires some analysis, which may be the subject of an upcoming, one of our pre-summer classes with regards to, certain rules and regulations that might not necessarily be always enforced. In this case, it was enforced, so it's not an issue, but there are, just as one example, with regards to building codes, people like to sometimes add additions or do work on their house, and officially sometimes you need certain permissions and permits from municipalities to do so. But how necessary is it? Do they let you skirt it? Different places might be different, and there are those that say halachically, just like people are allowed to jaywalk, or no one says it's forbidden to jaywalk, even though it's illegal. There's that aspect. But here, what was motivating was a sense that, look, there's an alternative. The health department requires X, and Y should also be a valid substitute. That was the rationale for what was taking place. Because homeopathic medicine, right, is something that has been out there for a while. Right here you have from the National Institutes of Health website describing what it is. Obviously, they're not fans, but what is homeopathy? Homeopathy, also known as homeopathic medicine, is a medical system that was developed in Germany more than 200 years ago. It's based on two unconventional theories. Like cures like. The notion that disease can be cured by substance that produces similar symptoms in healthy people. And law of minimum dose. The notion that the lower the dose of the medication, the greater its effectiveness. Mainly, homeopathic products are so diluted that no molecules of the original substance remain. What's the bottom line? What do we know about the effectiveness of homeopathy? There's little evidence to support homeopathy as an effective treatment for any specific health condition. What do we know about the safety? Some products labeled as homeopathic may contain substantial amounts of active ingredients that could cause side effects and drug interactions. All right, so it's out there. Some people swear by it. Some people say it's terrible. What we would like to try and understand, what does Jewish law say about it? We know Jewish law says that v'rapo yirapeh, there's a mitzvah to go to doctors. We know that being a Jewish doctor is every Jewish mother's dream. We know that medicine plays a big role in Judaism. Some of our greatest scholars and sages were doctors. How does alternative medicine fit in? Especially, we know that the medicine mentioned in the Talmud and the different compounds that were produced to treat certain things or other different treatments don't measure up to contemporary science. Even those used by medieval doctors don't measure up to contemporary science. And we'll have to try and understand, in terms of sometimes there's a halachic threshold for whether or not we can actually engage in these types of alternative medicines if they don't have proof. Just as one example, we'll see it raised in the sources. We know that if someone is sick, right, if someone is in danger, we can do whatever is necessary to save their life. If they need to eat non-kosher, we give them non-kosher. What if there's a homeopathic remedy that's not kosher and the person's not feeling well? They're not necessarily in any danger, but this treatment would help them. And so, does it rise to the level of permissibility if it's something that's a treatment, and how does that get analyzed? And that we may be able to trace from some of the sources from the Talmud to today, in terms of those who look at this alternative homeopathic medicine. Questions, comments, reactions before we jump into the sources on this.
Rabbi, please give me a few examples of the ancient people who were rabbis.
Well, Maimonides was a rabbi and a doctor. Nachmanides was a rabbi and a doctor. It was kind of fairly well tread scholarship for them to study medicine. Remember, studying medicine in Maimonides' time was not going to medical school and getting a degree the same way. There's certainly Jews were involved in, once they started having medical schools in the 14th and 15th century, Jews were very active in pursuing medical degrees. There's a professor of medicine and doctor well known in the Orthodox community by the name of Eddie Reichman, and he has studied the records of all of these Italian medical schools and the degrees conferred upon Jews, and he has studied some of the students and some of the medical families, and really done deep research into this field of the first certified or graduated Jewish doctors. But medicine is certainly found significantly in the writings of our medieval Jewish scholars and philosophers, and certainly that continues more formally as a practice of medicine, the study of medicine evolved over the centuries.
Rabbi, did any of those people find any conflict between their practice of medicine and orthodoxy?
In general, no. The Rambam does say that his practice of medicine exhausted him. We have writings of Maimonides, how he describes his day and how by the end of the day he was so exhausted he could hardly lift a pen. But that's another reason why that medicine is so ingrained or intertwined in the ethos of Jewish scholarship and Jewish religious life, because of that has led to so much focus on medicine. A lot of it has to do with our focus on life and preserving life, prolonging life, saving life. It's only natural. And there are situations, and this is going to, we may see some of the examples that are there, that certain practices or suggested treatments go outside the pale of traditional Judaism. Obviously, what a doctor can and can't do on Shabbat is the subject of a lot of discussion with different opinions, right? Just because someone is a doctor is not a blanket exemption to do whatever they want on Shabbat. But it definitely is a springboard. Some of this is a springboard for, we talk about saving a life, right? How saving a life is not just the person who's right in front of us, but to save a life, you have to be trained. Well, to be trained, you may need to put yourself in an environment which may impact your religious observance during the period of your training. Also relates to something right now, we've touched upon it before in some of our discussions of what's going on in Israel. The idea that for example, soldiers are very regimented and have follow procedures, and that's ingrained into the military doctrine, military discipline, which sometimes involves going through tasks and exercises every single day or before engaging in any single exercise or activity, which means even if they're not going to fire their weapon on Shabbat, let's say they'll clean their weapon on Shabbat. Well, is that really necessary? It could be argued in a study of the effectiveness of a weapon that they don't have to drill on Shabbat the same way they do during the week and potentially break some of the laws of Shabbat. However, when you look at the larger picture, it may become necessary, and that also has to do with saving a life. So it's not in conflict. At the same time, it does open up a lot of pathways and conversations, for those who are halachically motivated to go down this path. It certainly can be a lot of fun. So let's start going down this path with regards to alternative medicine. So the Mishnah in Shabbat describes the laws of carrying. You're not allowed to carry in the public domain on Shabbat. So one may not go out on Shabbat with a locust egg, with a fox tooth, and with a nail from the crucified for the purpose of healing. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. So these were obviously things that people would have with them for that had healing properties or supposed healing properties, right? Obviously, nail from the crucified should not be strange. Crucifixion is not just a Christian thing. Crucifixion was a mechanism of execution in Roman times. So Rabbi Meir said you can't go out. Rabbi Meir says you can go out with them. The rabbis prohibit using these remedies even during the week due to the prohibition of following the ways of the Amorites. In Hebrew, that's called darkei emori. So you have on the one hand, Rabbi Meir saying, fox tooth, nail from the crucified, locust egg, go out with it around your neck because it's helpful. The rabbi says, no, you can't go out with it on Shabbat because it's not helpful, and therefore you're carrying on Shabbat. And not only that, it's darkei emori. This is an Amorite practice which rubs up against idolatry. Right? Darkei emori is a category of things which the Amorites would practice them, and therefore we avoid them because we don't want to be following in those practices. Some of the, if a locust egg or a fox tooth sounds kind of strange, there are other things. Some people say the red string, which people have sanctified with regards to Rachel's tomb when they sell strings, give a tzedakah, get a string at the kotel, or even the practice of kaparis, when they take the chicken and swing it around for atonement, have too much of an Amorite feel to them. So Rabbi Meir, go for it. Sages can't do it, and it's darkei emori. Gemara, the Talmud comments on this, source number 4. Abai and Rava both said anything that contains an element of healing and seems to be effective does not contain an element of the prohibition against following the ways of the Amorites. If it has some type of, if it's used, and maybe it has been used and helps somebody, then it's not darkei emori. The Abai and Rava are trying to explain, you have a very big chasm between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says, take it. Chachamim say, darkei emori. Abai and Rava are trying to bridge that divide by pointing out that Rabbi Meir must be following the opinion that there must have been a sense that this had been useful for someone who was sick, and therefore could be considered something that people carry outside, and it's not considered carrying. The sages obviously went from a different direction, but that's the Rabbi Meir's justification. So we encounter the ability that, at least according to Rabbi Meir, we see that within the rabbinic conception, there is a sense that alternative, strange, foreign practices that may heal can be validated, certainly can be validated and not be considered too strange or foreign or prohibited, may even be considered normative in order to carry on Shabbat. So that's, approaching these alternatives in that direction. Yuma also is a major source for this discussion about when we, outside practices or forbidden practices being permitted for healing purposes, of course, because Yuma talks about fasting on Yom Kippur. And what about someone who needs to break their fast because they're sick, or other aspects that can border on pikuach nefesh? So the Mishnah and Talmud there discuss this. So the Mishnah in Yuma says, in the case of one whom a mad dog bit, all right, so there was a dog who might have rabies, a mad dog bites somebody, you got to worry. That person might get the rabies. How are you going to treat them? One may not feed them from the lobe of the dog's liver. All right, because that was thought to be a remedy for the bite, but the rabbis deem it ineffective, right? If it would be effective and you're worried about someone getting rabies, do we care whether it's kosher or not? No, you can give them something that's not kosher if there's a significant danger concern. Here, there's a significant danger concern, but the lobe, dog liver lobe, no go because it's ineffective. Rabbi Mati ben Charash permits feeding it to him as he deems it effective. Furthermore, Rabbi Mati ben Charash says, with regard to one who suffers pain in his throat, one may place medicine inside his mouth on Shabbat, although administering a remedy is prohibited on Shabbat. There's a whole idea in general, we don't use medicine on Shabbat The rabbis were concerned that you may end up violating Shabbat in a more significant way, thinking back to the fact that when they would make medicine, they would grind it with a mortar and pestle, and this would violate one of the laws of Shabbat. So the rabbi said not to do it because you might do something worse. But if someone who suffers pain in his throat, you could place medicine there. This is because there is uncertainty whether or not it's a life-threatening situation for him, as difficult to ascertain the severity of internal pain. So therefore, a person has this pain, and you're not sure how serious it is. The rabbi said, set aside the rabbinic prohibition of medicine and give them the medicine. And a case of uncertainty concerning a life-threatening situation overrides the Shabbat. So we see Rabbi Mati ben Charash is extending this more permissive stance where we're willing to set aside certain prohibitions in order to deal with someone who is ill, and it could be worse. And he takes that logic to feeding the dog liver lobe. And so that's what's mentioned in the Mishnah, Machlokas, the sages, and Rabbi Mati ben Charash. The Rambam points out, as to be expected, this is source number 6, usually when you have a dispute between rabbis and one rabbi, Yachid v'Rabim, halacha kirabim. If you have one versus many, we follow the many. Halacha is not according to Rabbi Mati ben Charash, who permitted feeding the man the lobe of the liver of a crazy dog on the day of the fast of atonement if it bit, because it's not beneficial other than in an adapted manner. This is not a normal way of healing. Right? You just it's a great title for the sermon. Feeding the man the lobe of the liver of the crazy dog on the fast of the day of atonement. Right? It's got a good ring to it. Sages say we don't violate commandments other than for medicinal purposes only, which is a clear matter and that the simple logic and experience obligated. Right? Things which we know work. Right? Give them chicken soup. Don't give them mad liver lobe. And that when we have the experience that these things work, then we have an obligation, but not through adapted curing, because proof of their efficacy is weak, and it would not be logical to use such a cure. It doesn't seem to fit, right? So just because it's been done in some society, we have for the Rambam, he's starting to sound a little bit like a scientist. You have to have some evidence. Any experience such a cure is far from proven as we claim to use such a cure, and this is an important principle. Know it. He ends with keep this in mind. If you're talking about cures, you want to be able to know what their effectiveness is and the like. And so this idea of so the idea of the Rambam really sets in motion the idea that if we're talking about medicine, if we're talking about when we might be allowed to set aside certain laws, whether of Shabbat or Yom Kippur, you're going to want to have some almost empirical sense that this is something that works, and not something that's, an old wives' tale. So when this is discussed in Jewish law, in the laws of Shabbat, so source number 7, Shulchan Aruch Harav, this is Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Ladi. We talk about Shulchan Aruch, that originally was Rabbi Yosef Karo, right? He's writing in the 16th century. Shulchan Aruch Harav is the version of the Shulchan Aruch with the comments in commentary of Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Ladi, the first Rebbe of Lubavitch, the Chabad dynasty. So he writes in source number 7, anything which is well known for healing, even if we don't know how it comes about, that's something that you can use on Shabbat if you need to. If you do something, it doesn't really have anything to do with healing. This could be an Emorite practice. Torah warns us not to go in the ways of the non-Jew. But there's this idea of incantations that people would whisper when something happens, for healing, or an incantation that this person shouldn't get sick. I feel you're doing lachas de moel olav, and we don't know if it works or not. So if there's like a incantation which was recited, you don't know if it works or not, you can say it. But if you know it doesn't work, then it becomes prohibited. This idea of, on some level, what Shulchan Aruch Harav is referring to is that sometimes, people feel better if they get to say something. Or there's, a certain practice that gets followed that might set their mind at ease. But if it seems completely worthless, then it's prohibited because of Darkei Amori. Some say that anything which is silly, anything which is not proven, any type of incantation, any kind of kamiyah amulet is prohibited. And someone who is careful, someone who's a soulful person who wants to be more punctilious should worry about this. And then there's this comment in parentheses, as long as there's any need. So we see that the Shulchan Aruch Harav says, look, if it's out there and people do it, it makes you feel better, that's one thing. However, you know what? It might be nice to only stick to real medicine and not alternative things. But, maybe if it helps a little bit, then we can let you slide in it. There's a tension between wanting to be more pristine and only use tried and true things that work, and avoid any type of incantation or alternative medicine or amulet, even if some people like it and it makes put people at ease. But that last comment in the parentheses, well, if it'll make the person feel better, look, we see a hesitation when it comes to when there's illness and when there's danger. We don't know how far the illness will spread or how serious it may get. We have that, as we discussed, previously in other settings. We're not being lenient on some of these laws of Shabbat or these laws of non-Jewish practices. We're being we're being stringent on saving a life. And you see that tension developing, but you see, the Shulchan Aruch Harav taking these Mishnayos and taking these concepts and trying to put them into a more medicinal perspective, of the more modern era. He's writing in the 19th century, and therefore, seems to want to keep us stick to the medicine, avoid the folk medicine, avoid the alternative medicine. If people are doing it, he sees room to allow it. Better to completely avoid it. But if it makes people feel a little bit better, then maybe we can make an exception. Questions, comments? Okay. So now we're going to look at. Oh, yes, Miriam.
I just had a quick story. My grandson called me from out of town yeshiva, and he was saying there was a question about whether or not someone said if you had a toothache or a sore throat, you were allowed to suck on a tea bag. That should help you. So they asked Rosh Yeshiva, and there was a question whether or not you could do it. He goes, "You can do it because it's not going to work anyway."
Right, and something like that, has minimal halachic downside anyway.
Right.
Unless it was a pork infused tea bag.
No.
Yes, Hirsch.
So my question was on the quote remedies that were quoted in the Mishnah. Were they thought to be let's say mystical in nature, or were they thought to be to actually have some healing power? In other words, are we arguing against avodah zara, that there's some other power in the world, or are we just arguing against nonsense and science and methods that don't work? I'm not sure which.
I think we're talking about especially once you see how this gets filtered through the Shulchan Aruch Harav, were they used or not used? Did people find them useful? In almost the idea of ra'inu raya. If people are using them, it must be proof that for someone it works. And in that case, right, the Chachamim said, that's not enough of a proof. And Rabbi Masya ben Charash says it is enough of a proof. It's out there, right? It's less about effectiveness and whether or not people think it's effective. And they think it's effective if they're using it. And so for in terms of the whether or not that crosses the threshold into being permitting certain prohibitions in order to make use of these things, right? The Shulchan Aruch Harav talks us really within the realm of Darchei Amori, the idea of the lachash and the like, right? He's not talking about the crazy dog liver lobe, but there is it's almost, it also has to cross the threshold. This will take us directly to when some of the contemporary rabbis talking about homeopathic medicine, whether we should even engage altogether in something if it's not effective, right? There's the crossing the threshold to break halacha because it might be effective, and then there's the whole Darkei Amori concept that, well, if it's Darkei Amori, we have to avoid it. What if it's just stupid? If it's just stupid, which borders on Darkei Amori, right? That's usually how we get away with the red bindle and kaporis by saying it's close, but it's just foolish and it's okay to do foolish things.
Right, but the homeopathic, the story that you started off with about the vaccinations,
right?
There, now we can do statistical and scientific proof and show that those other things, far from not being effective, are actually harmful because they're putting the child at risk, right. And they're putting, by the way, they're putting also the general public at risk,
right?
Because
for some, it is not the place to go down the rabbit hole for all of the various experts and authorities and facts and figures that people talk about. But some would say that maybe rises to the level of somewhat effectiveness, that it could replace the vaccine for some people. And so you have there's a dina the malchus dina issue, which you have to follow the law. But from a medicinal perspective, maybe drinking Clorox is enough of a way to check your base on that, and avoid a certain illness. And so that's really the discussion that people start asking, in terms of homeopathic medicine. Is it something that we know how Judaism looks positively at medicine? Who gets to decide what the medicine is? And in 1982, there was a rabbi named Rabbi Chaim Rosenberg from Antwerp who started asking other rabbis, what their thoughts were on homeopathic medicine. And specifically, he was looking at, sometimes they have non-kosher ingredients. And if you have something that has a non-kosher ingredient, what triggers the ability to, for example, look, they have a non-kosher ingredient, but it's batel, it's nullified, it's only a tiny amount. In general, that's not enough. We don't say, I'll make chicken soup with a drop of milk. Right? We don't let that happen. But if a drop of milk falls into the chicken soup, it's okay. So if there's a non-kosher ingredient in a homeopathic remedy, I wouldn't allow it, but wait a second, it's batel, and maybe it's effective, so maybe I can rely on the nullification in this case. Right, this the medical examples. What about they have caplets that are coated in gelatin? Well, most of the time we say, I think the consensus view is you can swallow them because you're not eating them, and there's a medicinal purpose, and there's butter. So the question is, what about homeopathic remedies? Can you say the same? Can you use the same logic for having them that contain non-kosher ingredients? Right. Some might say that kind of a parallel track to this is supplements, vitamins. Right. We always talk about medicine is okay, but what about vitamins? Right. Vitamins, is that the same level of necessity that would allow you to take to swallow things that have a gelatin coating and the like? And so the things get a little bit more tricky. I mean, I'm sure some of you are aware there's a whole kosher vitamin industry. Right, I think it's probably called koshervitamins.com. Right, this is also similar to Pesach, when you have the whole kosher for Pesach industry for toothpaste, and mouthwash and things of that sort. So it's not completely far-fetched. So this Rabbi Rosenberg started asking the question, specifically with regards to alternative medicine, homeopathic remedies. And so he submitted a question to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. And it's all in the Torah journal Hamaor from 1983. And Rabbi Feinstein's response was written by his son-in-law, Rabbi Tendler. And so he wrote, my master and father-in-law, Sorsei, Rabbi Feinstein Shlita, asked me to inform that he does not desire to relate to your question despite its interesting halachic aspects. Homeopathic therapy cannot be considered therapy that is proven and tested, and thus possible for people to use without it being in opposition to the will of Hashem. A therapeutic doctrine that disparages rationality, leads to nonsensical beliefs, and renders its practitioners dangerously susceptible to the influence of foreign worship, hidden beliefs, and finally to the denial of the order of the world ordained by Hashem Yisbarach. Since he does not wish to involve these doctrines, Rav Feinstein Shlita is compelled to decline to respond to your query. Right, the letter that Rabbi Tendler wrote back is he sees this as going kind of into the extremes. He doesn't want this to be something that becomes that gets bogged down into quacks and coops. He says basically, you have medicine, you follow the doctors, you follow the science, and that's that. He didn't want to go down in the direction of where this would go. Now, even in the realm of alternative medicine, you have all different types. You have You have some, you have those who, have more medical grounding and some which have less medical grounding. But Rabbi Tendler writes in the name of Rabbi Feinstein doesn't want to go there. Now, this Rabbi Rosenberg, as well as the author, the editor of the journal, Rabbi Meir Amsel, feel that this is kind of skirting the issue, right? He's avoiding, right? And so in source number 9, this is Rabbi Amsel's editorial comment to that letter. The words of Rav Tendler are baffling. He's written like a Baal Musar, not like a Baal Hora. He's not addressing the halachic issue. He seems to be avoiding it. Particularly baffling are his words in the name of his father-in-law, Rav Feinstein, whose style is always that of Hora, halacha lamasa, and does not utilize words of Musar. He's like, he's kind of, a little bit dismissive of what seems to be Rabbi Feinstein or Rabbi Tendler saying Rabbi Feinstein wants to avoid the issue. Now, it has to be noted, Rabbi Amsel and Rabbi Feinstein butted heads on numerous halachic issues. So there's a little bit of what we would call the kinas sofrim, the jealousy of the sages at work here, that Rabbi Amsel feels that he's ready to engage in the subject and Rabbi Feinstein is not. But, you also have Rabbi Menashe Klein, who was also asked the question, rabbi in the Haredi community. Source number 10, I have not understand his intention for all these homeopathic therapies are, on the contrary, natural therapies, which are made from various types of herbs. Most conventional medicines and therapies come from various herbs. I therefore do not know what he's talking about, that this is not in the category of rational therapy. I've not seen any basis to be stringent in our case and not utilize these homeopathic therapies that are made from various sorts of herbs. And these are therapies that were traditionally used, and it's not a new thing. So you seem to have a more accommodating approach. However, he doesn't really get to the heart of the matter in terms of some of the halachic complications and whether or not these alternative medicines rise to the level of treatment in order to, again, have the non-kosher ingredient in the remedy and the like. But he says, look, it's out there. He's again, he seems to be talking more about the natural type of stuff, the herbal remedies and the like, which aren't necessarily on the same level. Now, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson in a letter, he seems to say it's not understood why one would seek payach. It's not well understood, considering the Torah gave permission for the doctor to heal. He seems to be taking the more rational, scientific, stick to the doctor's approach. Why go off into this? Why go off into this direction? Rabbi Shmuel Halevi Vosner says, perhaps source 12, this is one of the laws of nature. Kadosh Baruch Hu established in creation. We do not know. Why should it be called supernatural? He says, look, what makes it alternative? Right? It can be part of it. It's one of the options that's out there. We just, the doctors went in one direction and we went in another direction. So, in this little attitude, he seems to be more accepting. But if you dig a little bit more deeply into that responsum, he starts talking about what about the kosher status if it has non-kosher ingredients, and he says be'etzem kashrus harafuos anal kasha lahachnis atzmi. It's difficult for me to insert myself and give an answer. We don't have all the precise information, right? Try to find out the ingredients in a lot of these compounds, and you're not going to get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. What I understand, right? It seems that we are, in a case like this, if it has like a non-kosher ingredient, it's not a Torah prohibition. We're pratinasu dilulim rabim. Right, everything is ground up, and just small different ingredients has been that you're only talking about a really small amount, and there could be nullification. What about chametz? Chametz you can't even have even a small amount. In name of the alcohol, maybe the alcohol that went into the creating of the compound wasn't chametz at all. If it's a dangerous situation, a chola that is in danger, you can be mekel. Now, that's not such a big leap. Why? Because if there's danger, you can do anything. So you see that Rav Vosner is somewhat accepting of the concept that there could be other types of remedies, but when you get down to the brass tacks and the nitty gritty, he says, I'm not sure I have all the facts for this. If it sounds like it's not a Torah prohibition because no one's eating anything not kosher in large quantities, and it's only small quantities. And on Pesach, if you're talking about chametz, well, you can ascertain the origins of the alcohol. And by the way, if it's a situation where the sick person is in danger, you can be mekel. That's not a huge leniency. That's just following the law. Right? And especially if they have been tried before. If it's mixed up with things that have nothing to be worried about, so it's even further nullified. If it's a sick person who's not in any danger, if it's certainly whatever non-kosher ingredient is nullified by 60 times of everything else, then it's okay. Milvad chametz b'Pesach, unless we're talking about a potential chametz issue. Since my time is very limited, I haven't gone into all the details. Maybe I'll come back to it. So there's conceptually, sure, whatever works. But is it really permissible? You see a hesitation because it involves sometimes certain leniencies that if the person's sick and in danger, willing to make. Otherwise, maybe we'll get back to it another time. So that is the approach of Rabbi Vosner. Rabbi Usher Weiss has a similar attitude conceptually towards alternative medicine. Regarding that which you asked my opinion concerning complementary medicine, like one brain and applied kinesiology, you primarily asked about therapeutic method of emotional freedom techniques. Now, I was honored to not ask my opinion about the worth of all these and to what extent they are effective. In my opinion, most of the things that the masses run after are matters of foolishness and nonsense. But the Torah does not forbid being foolish. And in my humble opinion, there's no prohibition whatsoever in any of these according to the doctrines of their practitioners. We're speaking about therapy that's based on the ways of nature, physical and spiritual. We're not dealing with paranormal matters. Anything that remains an element of feeling does not contain an element of the prohibition of the ways of the Amori. Conceptually is embracing. Of course, Rabbi Weiss is not going down the path of the halachic potential difficulties. Also interesting, he says the Torah does not forbid being foolish. They say, in the name of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, that he did think things that are foolish are prohibited. Because I think they once were asking him about, in karate classes, everyone bows towards the sensei. And, so they said, well, is that a little bit like bowing towards a person? Is that, bordering on idolatry? And they quote Rav Soloveitchik as responding, no, it's just stupid. And doing stupid things is awesome. So, he I don't know what he would say about alternative medicine, but just the fact that Rabbi Weiss said the Torah does not forbid being foolish. Rav Soloveitchik homiletically said that being foolish might be against the Torah. And, so Rabbi Dr. Shlomo Minkowitz, contemporary physician, when writing about the subject, in another case, the opinions of the conventional doctors and neuropathic healers were in direct opposition regarding the care of a critically ill patient. He deals with a case where it actually was. The doctor said one thing, and the alternative healer said something else. The Rebbe, or Lubavitcher Rebbe, instructed the family to ask a halachic expert and agreed they should consult Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rabbi Auerbach ruled that they should follow the opinion of the regular doctors, since more people work in that field. They're therefore able to invest much more in research and development. So just a case where Maaseh Shahaya, doctors, alternative medicine, a halachic decision was made to lean towards the doctors. So, is it medicine? Well, it's not medicine, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's forbidden. It doesn't necessarily mean even engaging in it, you can't apply the same halachic principles that we do towards medicine. But I guess, buyer beware. It seems that you have this more conservative approach of a Rabbi Feinstein, of a Rabbi Schneerson. You have Rabbi Weiss saying, I'm not saying it's any good, but, I'm not going to say it's forbidden. You have some who seem to be a little bit more embracing. That it's all certainly possible, but when you get down to the nitty gritty about allowing certain violations of Jewish law in order to take these remedies, you see things start to break down along party lines and in a certain reluctance from engaging in them. It should be God's will that we shouldn't need any of these remedies. Everyone should just stay healthy. But as we need it, we always say Baruch Rofei Cholim. Thank God we have the one who heals and empowers the healers. And as the famous sign likes to say, God heals, the doctor takes the fee. All right. So what do we do now? Let's schedule an appointment at